Yes.
Perfect, perfect. So much is going on. I was asked to sort of give an update of what I see going on here in the United States on many different fronts. I'll try to touch some of them. Of course, I can't hit everything. What's happening today is on Capitol Hill in particular is very important for the Jewish community and for Israel. Today, there's a hearing in the House Education and Workforce Committee with the president of Columbia University. There's a follow-up hearing from the famous hearing heard around the world with the presidents of Harvard and other universities that everybody heard when they talked about. It depends on the context, whether calling for the genocide of Jews violates the school's code of conduct. So there's a follow-up of those hearings. We have the president of Columbia University is there, a bunch of students that are testifying. I know some of the students helped prep some of the students on their testimony on what they're going to speak about. What I'd like to say is that the situation actually on college campuses is worse than anybody can ever depict. If you spend any time speaking to students, it's not just at the elite universities that most people think that there are definitely exceptions, but in almost all of the major universities in our country today, if you have kids there, it's very tough. At Columbia, for example, today, there's supposed to be a pro-Israel rally as a response to what the day of rage that we had on Sunday all over the country and all over the world. So in response to that, they have tents. They put out tents overnight in the main quad of Columbia University and put a fence around the tents and said that it's an occupied Palestinian refugee camp and Free Gaza to try to preempt the Jews from being there, which is really the story at Columbia and other schools. It's not a story about free speech. If it were, it would be a different discussion. It's a story about free speech for those who are calling for the genocide of Jews and really ostracizing the Jewish community around their campuses. And when the Jews themselves try to stand up, in almost every case, they're getting shot down. At Columbia, an event that I was supposed to speak at was canceled because the school said they couldn't provide sufficient security. And that's every day. And unfortunately, it's getting worse. A lot of people believe that the firing of the president at Harvard and other schools have solved the problem. It's really just been lip service. Schools like MIT in particular are really bad. But even in Florida, which is a bastion of hope in our country when it comes to this issue, even in Florida, University of Southern Florida and Tampa, the incidents that the students are dealing with there are heartbreaking at worst. There's lots of lawsuits pending against these universities as well. People want to know what they can do. There's a lot of lawsuits, Title VI actions. The big funders of the universities have all written letters and trying to threaten to pull their money. This same committee and the House Education and Workforce Committee is doing an investigation on foreign funding and the influence at universities, because a lot of the issues have to do actually with the professors, not just the students. I've spoken to many of the members in that committee. They already have the information, so a lot of it is show. That information is out there. There's a lot of organizations who have already uncovered a lot of the financing that's going to these universities. It's about putting it out in a public sphere. The other big issue, like everybody knows, is the House supplemental bill to fund Israel. Just now, as we were about to start, I got a text from my partner in Washington, D.C., that Mike Johnson put out that he's about to release the foreign aid bill that people have been talking about the last 2 days. It's going to be separate for Israel and Ukraine and Taiwan, all separate. And within each of those bills, there's going to be separate votes for Iron Dome, for replenishing munitions, etc. They're going to be adding it apparently with also a border security package. It sounds like it's something pre-negotiated to make sure they get the votes from the Freedom Caucus and those on that front. And also it's going to include a ban on TikTok, a prospective ban on TikTok. It's probably going to hit the news now in the next hour or so if it hasn't already. It's all going to be together, which really spells a little bit of disaster for us, because the more things that they have together, the more chances it won't pass. But the reason why they're splitting it up is to see if at least the Israel part can pass. What will happen then for those following, it will have to go back to the Senate, even though the Senate has already passed it, but it was part of a big package. If the House changes the bill, it has to go back to the Senate. So it'll go back to the Senate. The president has said he doesn't want to sign an individual Israel bill. It's likely trying to just pressure to make sure Ukraine goes through as well. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens if it gets to that Senate, if it passes the Senate, and if it gets on the president's desk. I don't predict a scenario where it gets to the president's desk and he does not sign it. I think it's just posturing to try to make sure the Ukraine funding goes through as well. More on the lawfare front, I'll share with you all, we filed a lawsuit against Associated Press. It's been in the news for their hiring a Hamas-affiliated photographer who, before they breached the fence into Israel on October 7th, sent out a telegram that said, "Today we're going to bring glory to God," or to Allah, and came across no vest. There were a known affiliate of Hamas, was celebrating, came back. All those images that you see were from him, and these were pictures that they purchased from him. And so we're hoping it's filed in the United States District Court in the Southern District of Florida. 4 lawyers are doing it. We're all doing it pro bono, and just trying to work through. The discovery is the most important part of that case, so we can learn really what they knew, how they knew, and really uncover some of the relationship between Hamas and other terror organizations and the press. Bigger picture, Jewish community, as we know, continues strong in most of our strongholds in the United States, in South Florida, and California, and Ohio, and New York, of course, and Dallas, and Houston. All the communities are strong. They continue incredibly engaged. I've been speaking around the country for different events, and it's nonstop. The support for Israel is nonstop. I do want to just wave a flag to everybody. I'm involved in government and politics. We have to really be sure as a community, this unity that we've found once again, this newfound unity in the Jewish community here. We shouldn't let this political season divide us again. We can have different political views, but we have to really stand together on so many issues that are existential for us, not just in Israel, but here in the United States. And I think that's a critical point that I hope we can continue to engage within our own community. We don't have to agree on where we vote or how we vote, but we shouldn't let that divide us. And we could talk more about that. The last thing that I can shed light on that is unique to what I do for a living, I deal with governors and mayors across the country for business reasons, but also on Jewish issues and for Israel. There is a big fatigue with regards to Israel going on right now, just like the fatigue we saw with Ukraine. There's big city mayors, big state governors who kind of they do want to see this moving along, and it's starting to what it is there's a lot of wear and tear from the anti-Israel crowd. So even those who are standing strong for Israel and for the Jewish community are getting exhausted, and their support is starting to wane. Most of it is behind the scenes. They're still saying the right things, but if you have private conversations with them, if you help counsel them, which is what me and some of my friends and partners do, we're really starting to see that. So I think we have to redouble our efforts. It shouldn't just be people in my business talking to these guys. Everyone needs to reach out to their elected officials. Don't assume that this is still top of mind for them. This is something that it's our responsibility to make sure that people still remember. There's still 134 hostages in Gaza, 6 of them Americans. This anti-Semitism is exploding in the United States. It's unacceptable. These are things that we need to, as a community, everybody needs to reach out and be involved in. I could tell you I was in Mexico this weekend speaking to the Mexican Jewish community, 40,000 people there. It was small but very strong and united community. And they and the Jewish community all over the world is actually very concerned about what's happening in the U.S. People are very concerned and looking to see ways they can help. So I actually found that heartening to know that people outside of here are actually focusing on what's happening in the U.S. But I am an eternally optimistic person. I'll be going to Israel, God willing, on Sunday for Passover with my family to vote with my feet, as they say, and be there and support. And God willing, we'll stay safe and we'll continue the fight here. And what I urge all of you, again, is let's make sure we keep the unity in the community, especially in these coming months, and that we keep the pedal down to the metal, because there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and there's not enough of us in this country for any of us to be doing it alone. It only works when we all do it together. So thank you so much, and glad to take any questions.